All right, so I read about a teacher, and she asked her class of 11-year-olds to tell a story to the class that had taught them about life. So Ashley said, well, my father's a farmer, and we've got a lot of egg-laying hens. One time we were taking our hens to market in a basket on the front seat of the car when we hit a big bump on the road and all the eggs got broken. What truth did you learn from that event? Asked this teacher, and she said, well, my dad said, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Very good, the teacher said. So next, little Sarah raised her hand, and she said, our family's farmers too, but we take our chickens to market for the meat. One day we had a dozen eggs, and when they hatched, we only got 10 live chicks. And the truth in this story, according to my dad, was don't count your chickens before they hatch. So the teacher prompted little Michael a little bit. She said, well, Michael, do you have a story that your dad told you? He said, yes, ma'am, my daddy told me this story about my Aunt Emma. Aunt Emma was a flight engineer on a plane in the Gulf War, and her plane got hit. She had to bail out in enemy territory, and all she had with her was a bottle of whiskey, a machine gun, and a machete. She drank the whiskey on the way down so the bottle wouldn't break, and then she landed right in the middle of 100 enemy troops. She fought for her life and took down 70 of them with a machine gun until she ran out of bullets. Then she took down 20 more with a machete until the blade broke. And then she killed the last 10 with her hands, her bare hands. Good heavens, said the horrified teacher. What kind of truth did your daddy teach you from that horrible story? He said, he taught me to stay as far away as possible from Aunt Emma when she's been drinking. So there are some truth stories for you this morning. So, you know, for the last several Sundays, we have been talking about spiritual laws. And these spiritual laws govern our universe. We've been talking a lot about quantum physics, but we've also been talking about the other truth principles, because remember, the two words, law and principle, they're interactive. They mean the same thing. The dictionary defines principle as an important underlying law regarding the basic way that something works. You know, we've talked about it in the context of 2 and 2 is always 4, so 2 and 2 will always work. That's a law, that's a principle. We have many laws like that govern our universe. Gravity is another one. We can always depend on gravity. It's never not going to work. So we in Unity have 5 basic laws, and I think this was asked in one of the Sundays where I did Stump the Minister. What are the basic principles that Unity lives by? So I'm going to give them to you this morning. They're the 5 basic laws, which when we use them, always work. The first one is only one presence and one power in this universe and in our lives. One presence and one power. We don't believe in a negative power. The negativity comes from within us. The second one is our essence, our very essence, the truth of who we are, is fully expressed in Jesus and inherently as good. We are inherently good. We are born to be good people. You know that when you look in the eyes of a precious new child. Children are good and beautiful and innocent. Our third basic law is we are co-creators through our thoughts. We talk about that a lot with quantum physics. Our thoughts, our words, our deeds, and our actions co-create with that which created us And the law that we stand by with that is the law of quantum physics. That's our third basic unity principle. Our fourth unity principle is to align our thoughts with God mind. And we do that through prayer and meditation. So don't miss Darlene's Tuesday morning meditation. It's really good. But this is how we keep our thoughts aligned with what is true and right, is through going within, through prayer and meditation. That's our fourth principle. And our fifth principle, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, our fifth principle is it's not enough to know the other four basic principles. We've got to be able to put them into action. We've got to be able to live from them. And what we teach in Unity is the first four of the five principles are all about shifting our consciousness, about learning a new and different way to be than perhaps we learned in other churches or growing up. So the first four principles are for us to shift our consciousness to a new understanding of who we are and who God is, before we can have the tools to change our behavior, which is our fifth principle. So the fifth principle is, how do I show up in the world? I show up in the world by remembering who I was created to be, living from my highest good, my highest thoughts, my highest actions, and my highest words. So today, one of those ways that we're going to explore more deeply, that we live from that fifth principle, we take it out into the world with us. It's you know, I used to, at church on Sunday, I would give everybody homework. They had homework to do. So at the end of it, I'd tell them they had to go out and do something that week. Because what we learn here at Unity has to be put into action. It has to be, we have to live it on a daily basis. So today we're going to talk about living the law of truth. You know, you've heard the old saying over and over, truth will set you free. And truth truly will set you free. If I tell the truth and I never have to wonder what I said to somebody that wasn't true, that I might have to remember. So you're free, you know, you go to bed at night, you go to sleep, you feel good. You don't have anything that you have to look back on when you didn't tell the truth. So truth will set us free if we align our actions, our thoughts, and our deeds with that truth and live from that truth. We have to put our money where our mouth is. And when we do that, everything goes right in our lives, because we have nothing that we have to be concerned over. When we tell the truth, people can count on us. People can trust us. If I didn't stand in my truth and live my truth, you wouldn't be coming here today to hear what I have to say, because you really wouldn't trust whether I meant it or lived it or not. Truth, I have this big, does anybody know what the Strong's Concordance is? The Strong's Concordance is a book about this thick. I think we might have one back in the library. And in the Strong's Concordance is every single word that's in the Bible, alphabetically. And so so like the word truth is in the Bible, in a Bible verse, and it tells you the verse where you can find it, 240 times there are stories about the word truth. There are 200 times in the Bible. I counted it this week for both of those, just so I could give you a vision of it. 200 times we find in the Bible the word trust, because if people don't tell you the truth, you don't trust them. And you can't have a relationship without trust. You can't. You can try, but you can't. So 240 different verses in the Bible talk about truth. 200 verses in the Bible talk about trust. And 16 places in the Bible talk about integrity. Integrity, as we remember, is in integrating what we think, what we speak, and what we do in action. All three are integrated. We are a person of integrity. And when we are a person of integrity, we tell our truth, we live from our truth. People trust us. We tell the truth. We never have to backtrack. We never have to try to remember what we told somebody before. And we can never have a clear, concrete relationship without trust. Very, very difficult. When marriages get into places where lies are told and discovered, getting that trust back is very, very hard. And we're talking about it today. It is one of those spiritual values. It is one of those spiritual virtues that we talk about. Like I said, the fifth basic principle is living the values that we teach here. I know all of you come here on Sunday because you're interested in what this philosophy is and how you can live it, because when you live this philosophy, your life is amazing. It's wonderful. So we have to strive to live our spiritual teachings, and we have to speak them boldly with actions that we take. We have to put our hands and feet in action, not just to talk about it, but to be it. And I say we have to hold others accountable for telling only the truth. You don't want to be around somebody that you can't trust to tell you the truth. And, you know, we've got a lot of leaders right now who play really loose and fast with the truth. We've got a lot of TV channels and newspapers and other forms of communication like Facebook that don't necessarily stand for the truth. And we have to hold them accountable. We have to be who we say we are. And, you know, I've lived a lot of years, and truth didn't used to be an issue in this country. And if you've lived as long as I have, you know, truth did not used to be an issue in this country. We were proud of telling the truth. I was a banker in Houston, Texas for 27 years, and in Dallas for 2 more years. Most of my years in banking, we could do business on a handshake. Now, we had a few papers to sign, but basically, you had a few papers to sign, and you shook the banker's hand. The banker shook the person's hand who was asking for the transaction, and you knew you had somebody who stood for what they said. A handshake was as good as our word. The deal was sealed. You could count on the loan or the transaction to be handled completely with honesty. Men and women took great pride in being honorable. You know, I look back and that was a really easy way to do business. If a person ever breached the agreement that they made and lied to us, they were held to accountability and they were punished in some way. It was not worth it to not tell the truth. Lying was simply not tolerated. Truth was a virtue, and trust in business was everything. Today, anybody gone to get a loan in the last few years? Paperwork's ghastly. It's time consuming, and it's exhausting because too many people decided not to be honest. And we had to change all the rules and make documents that held their feet to the fire, because over the years, honesty has kind of lost its supreme standing. So every one of us who would like to have a loan, who are very honest, have to suffer for the few who didn't want to be honest. And we have to go through, any of you bought a house in the last few years? The documents go on forever to try and just have a transaction. We always had rogues, but the rogues were called to task for what they did wrong. Remember Nixon? And there were a couple of other presidents who decided to cheat and to lie, but their peers, their own peers said no, and their own peers held them to account. It was a good and a trusting time in our history because we could count on the journalists to tell the truth. We could count on a journalist to be fired from a newspaper or a magazine if they didn't tell the truth. And they were banned and blackballed from being journalists again. That doesn't happen anymore. So when we read something, we could count on it because we knew the integrity that stood behind it. Fast forward to the era of television and Facebook and Twitter and social media of all kinds, and we have no idea what the truth is unless we go fact check it somewhere. And finding the places that you can trust to fact check also take a little time. So we no longer know what to believe from our news, from our newscasters, from our social media. And as best I can tell, there's not any consequences for not telling the truth. But here's what I see when I look at the big picture. The truth of that is that's tearing apart the fabric of our lives. Truth is an anchor, and we've lost our anchor. Our anchor with our relationships, and we're always in a relationship. You're in a relationship with H-E-B when you go in to buy groceries. We are always in a relationship of some sort. And our relationships are anchored in truth and in trust. Truth is who we were created to be. It's one of our God virtues. How we treat other people. When you're not telling the truth to somebody else, you're disrespecting that person. You're not giving them your best. So the anchors that this country was built on, and that most of us in this room grew up with, has gone by the wayside. And what I notice is everybody's just kind of looking the other way, because perhaps we don't quite know what to do about it, or perhaps we think that what we're seeing is the truth without checking it. We have to be more diligent. That part of our divinity, that part of our spirit is being, it's like in the dry desert right now. That part of us that is the truth of who we were created to be and how we were created to be with one another. That essence of God that is that second principle that I just talked about is not being lived and honored, especially by our leaders. Jesus, and I looked at a lot of these verses of those 240 verses, And a lot of them were things about Jesus and his talking and his teaching. And he always referred to truth as the spirit of truth. Our spirit is our divine. We're human and we're divine. The human of us, when we get into fear, the human of us may tell a fib because we're in fear. We may look the other way when someone else tells a fib when we're in fear. But the truth of who we are as spiritual beings is that we are created to be truth, the spirit of the truth. And when our spirit is threatened, think about this in any way. When your spirit's threatened, you're threatened. And I see this in our society. We've lost our compass. We've lost our North Star. You know, there's a saying, remember this saying, if we don't stand for something, we will surely fall for anything. We have to decide who we are and what we stand for, and then we have to stand for it boldly. Sometimes we shy away from it because we're afraid. But this is where we are today. And the further away from truth that we get and have allowed those who lead us, you see, a leader has to be above reproach, or they're not a leader. And our leaders have lost their way. Our leaders have not chosen honesty. And the further away we get from truth and are allowed to be led by dishonesty, the more confused and the more disgruntled that we have become. It's not who we were created to be. And we see so much unrest and so much unhappiness today in our world. That's a part of it. Nobody has a solid ground that they stand on. We can't believe the news. There's no consequences for not telling the truth. And we have to re-examine where we're going and how much our society is being guided by and led by fear. Part of this is happening, at least this is my take on it because I've thought a lot about it. Part of this is happening, I believe, because, again, those of us in this room were not raised that way. We were raised to know that we could trust our neighbor. We could trust our maker. We could trust our leaders. The handshake was good. The honesty was dependable. We could trust. Now we can't. But those of us here who were raised that way, we're still trying to. We still want to. We still want to believe what we hear and see when we turn on the TV or the radio or the Facebook or the read the Washington Post or the Tribune or whatever. We want to believe it's the truth because that's how we were raised. That's what we've known our whole lives, is that I can pick up the newspaper and believe what I read. Not so anymore. We have to be more diligent. We have to do our homework. We have to look at everything that goes into what is going on and make up our own mind about it and find a way to fact check it and get it back. We want it back. We want to be able to have trustworthy relationships again. So we don't want to be led blindly because we can't the way we used to be. So, who do we trust? Where do we turn? Because we're not used to having to fact check. Right here is where we really know. We really know right in here what's right and what isn't. Now, sometimes we're willing to look the other way because we don't want to stir the pot, or we're not quite sure. But this is where we know, in our instinct, in the very depth of us, in that spirit of truth, that is who we were created. We know, whether we're looking the other way or not. We don't want to destroy our relationships. We don't want to be betrayed. We don't want to have conflict. And, every day as a minister, I look at these things and it breaks my heart. Children today, young children, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, are committing suicide. Oh my God. Because they don't have any way to, they don't have that place to stand, that rock to stand on. That's tragic. We have to re-examine. We have to come back to that compass of what is true and right for ourselves, for our country, for our children. And it's all a lack of trust. Children can't trust tomorrow. They don't know what's going to happen. They can't trust their friends. They can't trust social media. They can't, often sometimes can't trust their families. And it takes its toll on our spirit. It causes us to be angry. As we've seen in the last 4 years, it causes friends and relatives to be unkind to one another. We become divisive and split because we don't trust anymore. And when we can't trust, we have lost a part of our soul. We've lost a part of our spirit. When I was looking at those 240 places where truth and trust was talked about in the Bible, I ran across a story. It's too long to read it from the Bible, but I put it in excerpts. This story is found in 2 Kings, and it's chapter 18. It was written 702 years before Jesus was born. But it tells the story of the catastrophe that was about to happen to the people who could not trust their king to tell the truth. So the dialogue went like this. The prophet, 2 Kings is one about prophets. The prophets were the ones who brought messengers from God and really were the kind of the conscience of the rulers. And the prophet says, "On what do you rest this confidence of yours?" And he's talking to the king. "Do you think mere words are power for war?" Now, mere words, when I looked up what that would be in the metaphysical dictionary, it was like, not the truth. You've got some words here, but they don't hold any value. They're mere words. On whom now can you rely? Do you rely on Egypt, that broken reed of a staff that will pierce your hand, meaning that Egypt could not be trusted? Do not let the great king deceive you and tell you that he can deliver you out of my hand, meaning God's hand, for he cannot. This whole story, and it's a couple of pages long, but the story is about the king and the Pharaoh of Egypt wanting power. They're both willing to lie to get power. They're both willing to deceive people so that they don't even have enough food to eat. Sound familiar? And it says the people were silent. The people were silent and allowed the disaster. Not much has changed, has it? Leaders are hungry for power. They'll work only for their own benefit and their own well-being. And if they're power hungry, they're not going to work for your well-being. They're not interested in what's good for all people, only for themselves and their own families. Power without truth destroys. It doesn't build. Whether we're being told a story that happened 2,700 years ago, or whether we're living through one today, the destruction caused by seeking power without truth is the same. Isn't it interesting? Nothing has changed. In this same story, the prophet, who was a man of God, tells the people that they were to worship at the word of truth. Now remember, there's a lot of translations, so this is not perfect. This is not a perfect way of sentence structure, but in this story, he tells the people they were to worship at the word of truth, for it was the one true God. Very interesting. The other books that I read that I found in the Strongest Concordance were the book of Psalms. You can find truth all the way through the book of Psalms. And songs sung around truth, the stories of truth and the songs of truth, and the power that truth has. The psalmist speaks of choosing the way of truth. He says, truth will be your shield, and truth reaches to the clouds. How poetic is that? He also says, truth endures through all generations. And Jesus said, I did a whole talk on this once in school. Jesus said, I came not to bring peace. I came to bring the sword of truth. Now, metaphysically, in his day and age, the sword was the same as the tongue. So it was used as a metaphor for the tongue. So he came to speak the truth. He didn't come to bring peace. Remember, he didn't always bring peace everywhere he went. He stirred people up. He was a rabble-rouser, which is what got him killed. But he came for that spirit of truth. And remember, he said to the lawyer, it's not about the letter of the law. It's about the spirit of the law, the spirit of the truth. So it's something we've gotten away from. It's something that perhaps we've forgotten how important that living from our spiritual self as it applies the truth, how much that involves. And in your personal life and in your holding to your own truth, hold others to the truth as well. You know, when you're in a relationship, you hold that person you're in a relationship with, you hold them to the truth. Do that with everybody. Let's tell and show people that not being truthful is not being accountable. Truth matters to every living soul. We have to practice truth. We have to honor truth. We have to demand truth from our leaders in all walks of life. We must teach truth, be truth, and settle for nothing less. It's one of our virtues. It's right up there with love and peace and wisdom. Truth is the solid rock that this country was built on. And it's the solid rock we have to gain again, to stand on now in order to survive. Truth is an integral part of our spirit. We cannot look the other way. So let's do our part to make sure our leaders that we vote into office, men and women, are men and women of truth, that are trustworthy and filled with integrity. We want to get back the America that we knew and loved so well 200 years ago, 100 years ago, 50 years ago. said this last little piece because there's an interesting, there's a woman who is a Democrat. She lives on Long Island, and she's I don't know if she's I guess she's a House of Representatives. I don't think she's a senator, but she ran on making sure that that people would vote for her. She would tackle big pharma. She would tackle Medicare. She would tackle the medical industry for all the high costs that we're having to pay. And just this week, she voted against it when it went before a vote in Congress. Well, she did get in, but suddenly all of that truth she told to get in, she voted against. So we just have to pay attention to what's going on in our world. So that's all I have to say about truth, but just remember, it's part of who you were created to be. It's part of your wisdom and your peace and how you treat one another, how you love one another. You wouldn't dream of not being honest with someone you love. Don't forget who you were created to be. So let's take that into meditation right now. And we just hold in truth that divine nature that Dave Weber talked about this morning in the Daily Word. To remember who we are as divine. Yes, we are human. But more importantly and more powerfully, we are divine creatures. When we know that about ourselves, when we live from that about ourselves, we are set free. We are alive. We are living from spirit. We are living and in touch with the truth of who we are as spiritual beings. We are love. We are wisdom. We are peace. We are truth and kindness and strength. When we are spiritually conscious, we choose to live from that truth of who we are, that love, that wisdom, that honesty. We treat our fellow man, our relationships, the way that we would want to be treated. It is our true spiritual nature. Nothing can separate us from our spiritual nature, but we can forget it. And so this morning, let us make a commitment to not forget. To not forget the truth of who we are, the truth of who we were created to be. We're not here for just ourselves. We're here for each other. We're all created by the same Creator. We're here to love and support one another in all circumstances. So let us daily remind ourselves through prayer and meditation to embrace the divine within us. Christ that lives within us all. Christ meant the perfect imprint of man. Within us all is the perfect imprint of man, and we can claim it at any time. So let us remember who we were created to be, how we were created to show up in the world, how we show our love and respect for one another through our spirit of truth. And when we're tempted to stray, let us make a commitment to bring ourselves back to that solid ground of our true nature. So we give thanks for the truth of the power that we truly have, and that we truly live from when we are conscious. You know, we're not separate from one another, we're not separate from that which created us. We hold that truth and we live from that truth. So it is.